Good evening. Thank you for coming. On behalf of the Assyrian National Council of Illinois and the Stand with Robert Committee, and also Assyrians around the world, I wish to welcome you all. Just a little introduction about myself. My name is Magda Janicki. I'm an attorney down in South Florida, mainly practicing criminal defense. And I'm also a cousin of Robert DiColeta. I'm glad to be here to support someone that I once worked for, that I highly respect, that's someone who is very dear to me, and as well as within the community. I'm honored and privileged to be here, so thank you very much. Our first speaker tonight is Mr. Sheba Mandu. He is the president of the Assyrian National Council. He's been an activist in the Assyrian community for many decades and has guided the Assyrian National Council through wise and assertive leadership, making it one of the most important organizations among the Assyrians today. Please help me welcome Mr. Sheba Mandu.
ميقرا روبرت قليتا مقلسة قشيشة شيبة يونان مقلسة قشيشة شرب البشري بنونت أمتن خبيبة ميقرا مارتن منا مستعلانة chairman Chamber of Commerce Detroit وأخوني أسمت قرمو من كاسكا بالضبط كاسكا إيوا وخا organization خنطرتا وشما كالدايا سوريايا أطورايا قد فالخخوة الهقويات بني أمتن بخيلت آلها خاجخة كاسكا مخيخلا وكلنا مغدا إيوا خا أمتا ولي ما صبخة بارشلن إقار الجورة إجو قد قبلغلهم شينا باخدوتا اتشريلا جبنونة أمتن كلها تيول أخونا روبرت كسلي إلخا أغنسطة جبارة بليخ القضايا أمتا شلشيلة يويلة دويخيلة هل بد إذا خناشا هاورابا أمتنايا وبالقا أمتو ياود خلطة إن ليلو إذا خلطة درقل ضاعت راختي لما تخور له وإذا الخلطة سببت له يرب نونت أمتن آنت قم تسلم ميله روبرت إقارن بيوخ غوريله تشئيته ديوخ بريشايد بيتوتت على من خلق الشيشة يوسف قليتت خوميلة لشانا قدنا إماش نتوري ليلة استقطانا قد خقرن بيوخ ألما كله يطيلوخ إينا شهارت قكل خاطورايا كالدايا سوريايا سبب ليت متبرشنيا بنونت أمتن أخني بنونت خا أمتخ دوختخ بالخانخ أنتي لي شاريرة أنتي لي مجد أمتناي ميقريلة خايا خيتا خادوتن رابا قرطيلة خازخلق إجو أمن هاوت بسيمة قشل مجديت ويدل وتشيبو قاتخ وهاوت بسيم رابا
Next, everyone, we have a word from the family. Mr. Gilbert DiColeta and Mr. Ninos DiColeta. The DiColeta family wishes to express its gratitude to all of those who have come today and all of those who have given their prayers and support to Robert. Now, please help me welcome Mr. Gilbert DiColeta and Mr. Ninos DiColeta to say a few words.
Hello, everybody. Good evening. We wanted to first show you DiColetas come in all sizes, so that was important. With that being said, let me just say from the family, not only DiColetas, but all the family, because the family is very huge and it's around the world. It is our honor that you're here today. We knew what we felt about Robert and how we knew what kind of person he is, what kind of dedication he had, what kind of fortitude he had. And it's nice to know that you feel the same way about our family member as we do. So it is our honor that you're here. And I wanted to say something to Robert. Robert, there was a quote that I came across that kind of represented perfectly. It was by Thomas Paine, who's a founding father of America. He says, "A real man smiles in trouble, gathers strength in distress, and grows brave by reflection. And through private moments, through public moments, this is the man I want you to know that Robert is, was, and will be. Never changed, never wavered, never, tossed back and forth. And another thing I want to thank is Mr. Shibamando for the ANCI, for opening your doors to allow our family to say thank you on behalf of every one of us, whether De Kaleda or other. We thank you. It is, again, our privilege and our honor to be here, and it is to Robert, you have been a force for our family. You continue to be a force, and I thank God that we are here today.
Thank you, Ninos. Wonderfully said. A lot of people say I sound like Robert when I speak, so although I have a little bit of frog in my throat, so bear with me here. A little bit about my brother, Robert De Kaleda. Robert was born in Kirkuk, Assyria, which is now known as Iraq. He was 11 years old when he came in October of 1973. I happened to be 5 at the time. From an early age, Robert had been obsessed with athletics. He was into sports, weightlifting, and his studies. He competed in bodybuilding competitions in college, being a bit of a musclehead, and he let us feel it occasionally, a couple of headlocks here and there as growing up. He completed his studies and graduated from the University of Illinois with a bachelor in political science and philosophy. He went on to complete his master's degree from the University of Chicago and focused his thesis on the origins and development of Assyrian nationalism. He then went on to law school and earned his law degree from Loyola's University of Chicago Law School. While in law school, he published a magazine by the name of Nabu Quarterly, which had a lot more words than pictures, for those of you who like to read. The magazine probed important questions about the Middle East and the Assyrian or Chaldean people. Its articles were interesting and thoughtful and should make good reading even today. So that's Nabu, N-A-B-U, Quarterly. He was involved in various organizations and was one of the founders of the Ashur Banipal Library in Chicago. I was actually there at the time when he was doing it with his friends on Clark Avenue in Chicago. And also housed the AUA Foundation. I personally know how hard he worked on the library, having witnessed it myself on many occasions. And I also know that what Robert knows about the history of his people in the Middle East in particular, very few scholars know. His knowledge of archaeology and history is immense, which causes problems for him in family discussions, as you can imagine, as I would be corrected multiple times, which is good to have, by the way, a good correction occasionally. Robert had always appreciated the history of his people, understood the pain and persecution they had gone through, and did everything in his power to make good changes. He risked his life by going to Iraq many times, not just once. He donated his time and money and energy to help. Very important point here, Robert knows and is adamant about the words Assyrian and Chaldaic and Syriac reflecting one truth, and that is this. These words refer to the same people. The Assyrian Christians of northern Mesopotamia who speak Aramaic but are split into various religious designations. Robert always believed that people are free to express themselves and their identity, but he was always truthful to history. It was sad to see the prosecution attempting to show something else, for those of you who are familiar with the case. Robert had always been an example for us, his brothers and sisters, and they're all here, as well as his family, all my cousins and those who know Robert and grew up with Robert. He was honest, he was strong and assertive. He was not the person who the government tried to portray him in the interest of their case. That's not the Robert we grew up with and the Robert we knew. As a matter of fact, he slapped a couple of cigarettes out of my face as a teenager to remind me of how just a cause he was pursuing all the time. But Robert is our brother, is my brother, He's a friend to many of you here and many family members. If I listed all of the family members here, we'd go on all night. So I'm not going to name names. Everyone knows Robert's friends and family. We do, as Nino said, thank you very much for coming here, each and every one of you. You know what you have done to still stand with Robert. You stood with him prior to the case. You stood with him during the case. And here we are on March 17, 2019, and many friends and family still standing with Robert. So thank you all, and God bless you. And we look forward to many other speakers tonight. Thank you.
Next, we're going to hear from someone speaking of the importance of community cohesion and support. Mr. Athir Yuhana is an accomplished pianist and musician, and also a music teacher. Athir has been a friend and supporter of Robert for many years now. So please help me welcome him to the podium.
رمشاخ بشينا بشينا تتي كل أخون نأمتي مخبة أنا مخباني أخون أثير دانيال يوخنا. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome you all at the ANCI. I would like to speak about community cohesion and the importance of that element. Ladies and gentlemen, no doubt a community needs solidarity and unity to survive and to thrive as a community. And the Assyrian community of Chicago is no different. The solidarity and unity requires understanding and loyalty on the part of its members to each other and to the overall collective good of the community. And it needs advocates to fight for its rights, whether such rights involve the individual members of the community or the community as a whole. Robert D. Kaleta fought for the rights of individual members of the community, but he also fought for the community as a whole. He fought for our communities in Chicago and Detroit and Syria and Iraq and Iran. He was and is an educated intellectual voice, a fearless voice for the rights of those who are voiceless. I have known Robert and I've known the extent of his dedication, of giving his own talents, resources, money, and even risking his own life to visit our people in Iraq. I know no other such attorney in the United States. I've known personally many people who have been helped by Robert's legal skills. He is an attorney who pays attention to his clients and cares for them. He enjoys helping people. You rarely see this among many attorneys who simply treat what they do as a professional service for which they are paid. I can say without any question that the people that I know he helped were honest and good, as was Robert in the carrying out of his duties. It is an honor to see that Robert is being welcomed back into the community and being given so much support, not only among Assyrians and Chaldeans, but also from all over the United States and the world. These people were truly shocked, saddened, upset at his persecution. I need to get out of this script for a second. Jesus was betrayed by one Judas, one of his own. Unfortunately, Robert was betrayed by many Judas of our own. When a good person, a kind person who cares for others is attacked in this way, not only should people understand and sympathize with the person and give him the benefit of the doubt, but also should feel the attack themselves. We know that governments cannot be right all the time. In fact, here in America, we are taught that too much government power is not a good thing. Last, my one wish for Robert was that the intensity and love and courage that he used to fight for his clients and community was returned to him by the same who knew him in a more intense way. From the bottom of my heart, I will say this, especially by the Assyrian Chaldean attorneys that are out there. That would have been a perfect ending to this story. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Next, we have an attorney, Mr. Ivan Tomek, who has remarks about the case. Mr. Tomek is an accomplished advocate, and he's worked with Robert and has known him for years. He currently represents many clients in various immigration proceedings, as well in various civil and criminal matters. So, without further ado, Mr. Ivan Tomek.
Thank you. It's good to be here. It's good to be here talking about my friend Robert. We all know what's going on today in Iraq and Syria. But many years ago in August of 2004, when the first church bombing happened in Iraq, one man wrote an article and roared like a lion, telling the world what was going to come if people failed to act. That person was Robert D. Coletta. In that article, he talked about the rise of radical Islam. He talked about the things that needed to be done in order to stop that. This was in August of 2004, and no one listened. And now, close to 15 years after that first article was published, we look at a region today where 90% of the Christian population is no longer there. A population that lived in that area since the time of Christ, within 5 to 10 years, may cease to exist. The only thing Robert D. Coletta did in his legal career was to try to right a wrong and help his people. He did not create the foreign policy that led to what is happening today. It was not of his doing. In fact, he spoke out and asked the U.S. government through elected officials to do something before the danger got worse and worse. And as a result of that danger, millions of people had to flee. And Robert D. Coletta was at the front lines of trying to help those people. And for that help and for that hard work, members of his own community stood with the U.S. government to say there's no persecution of Christians in Iraq and Syria, which was an utter and complete lie. And I hate to say this, but Robert was right, that if you fail to act, as he said in 2004, the Christian population in Iraq and Syria will no longer be there. I am sure that's a topic that he would have rather been wrong on than right on, but history has proven Robert D. Coletta right, and it's proven the U.S. government wrong. Because if we're talking about a conspiracy that created a fiction, the fiction of the persecution of the Christian people of Iraq and Syria, then that must be the biggest conspiracy in the world, because it has led millions of people from Lebanon to Canada to the U.S. to Germany to Australia to New Zealand and Norway and Holland. Are all these people liars? Have they made up a story that doesn't exist? It's very hard to understand when you look at what they claim Mr. D. Coletta did. They claim that he created an illusion of Christian persecution. That is not an illusion, that is a reality. That is a reality that goes from Baghdad to northern Iraq, all the way to Syria, to Egypt, and most of the other countries of the Middle East. And people refuse to see what was going on. And Robert D. Coletta was the first person to stand up and say that if you do not take action, this entire region will be ravished, and he was right. So I look forward to reading his book, because in his book he's going to detail exactly why he was indicted, exactly why he was persecuted. And he will tell the truth about what is going on to Christians in the Middle East, which many have failed to tell America about. Robert will do that in his book, and I look forward to reading it. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Ivan. And as for the book, before I introduce the next speaker, we do have a table set up in the background where you can sign up to receive email alerts on when the book is going to be available, pre-order. So after we conclude, you can either see myself or Gilbert for more information on that. Our next speaker was going to talk about the significance of the case, and that's attorney Christina Abraham. She is a respected advocate and was actually on the legal team that represented Robert during his trial. She has a focus on immigration, employment, and civil rights law. Please help me welcome Ms. Abraham.
Thank you. Robert asked me to talk to the community about what's happening with immigration law and what your rights are, because he's never stopped actually caring about the community. And rather than asking me to really talk about himself, he asked me to talk to you about what you need to know, what the community needs to understand is happening today. So I'm going to go into that a little bit and then give you guys some advice. Our immigration system, something that has been happening, human beings have been immigrating from one place to another since the dawn of civilization, it's under attack today. And two of the ways that Assyrians tend to immigrate into the West, and particularly to the United States, is under attack today. And that is the asylum process and the family immigration process. Both of those are under threat today. And it's very important that we as Assyrians, with so many of us now voting US citizens, understand what these threats are and how they impact our community. To start, the asylum system is under attack, and as Ivan just so eloquently noted, the persecution of Christians in the Middle East is a very real phenomenon, to the point where today we face the process of extinction of the Christian minorities in the Middle East, and we have attacks on the family immigration process, where we have travel bans that don't allow people coming from specific countries, Assyrians included in that, to come and reunite with their families here in the United States. These are real problems that we have to be aware of, because we are actually a very powerful community in this country, and in this town particularly. We have a lot of people who can vote, who can run for office, who can become judges, who can become high levels of members of government here. And we should start to exercise that. Be politically active. Be aware of what the discussions are and start to defend the rights of people to seek reunification with their family, or for the rights of people to seek refuge in this country, something that has been a part of the foundation of America since it was founded. Know what your rights are. Know that when law enforcement comes to your door, you don't have to just give them whatever they ask for. You can remain silent. You can ask for an attorney. You can take their information and say, I'll call you back later, or my attorney will call you back. You don't have to talk to law enforcement just because they're coming and accusing you of something, or they're asking a lot of questions. Understand that you have a right to appeal a lot of things that happen. So if you get a denial, a lot of times people say, okay, well, what can we do? And then they give up. No, the system of government here allows us to make legal challenges, to challenge a denial, to take things to the highest level of court. And we should exercise that, because what we do, we don't just do for the family member or the person seeking asylum. We do for everybody who seeks asylum, every refugee who comes in here fleeing persecution. We have taken a step on their behalf too. And I think that's a really positive thing that our community can give. I'm going to talk a little bit about Robert, even though he didn't ask me to. I've known Robert for many years, and Robert is a true leader for a community that needs desperately good leaders. He's somebody that is okay with hearing different opinions, and he wants to bring everybody into the fold. And the way he does that is very different from traditional leadership, where they try to exclude differing voices. Robert wants to bring everybody into the fold, and what he does is he continues to expand the fold every time there's a difference in opinion, because he wants everybody included. And he does want to see a world where everybody, including Assyrian Christians, are happy and have the freedom to pursue their objectives and to be reunited with their families and to live in peace. Robert, as a leader of this community, I know that you have suffered greatly and you have sacrificed greatly for your community. And leaders are forged by what they sacrifice and what they suffer for their community. And so I hope that what you've experienced, while you didn't deserve to go through it, I hope that what you experienced will give you the lessons that you need to take it another step further for your community, continue to advocate on their behalf. And with what you have learned now, you bear witness to the injustices of this world and to how those impact your own community, how people were threatened and basically strong-armed into acquiescing. I hope that you take that and that you apply that now and take it to the next level for your community in terms of your advocacy and your work. I think that we need it, and we want to see it come from you. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Martin Mana. He's the Executive Director of the Chaldean Chamber of Commerce, and he'll be speaking about looking back and moving forward. Mr. Mana has been an incredibly talented voice for the community in both local, national, and international affairs, and please help me welcome Mr. Mana to the stage.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. Rabbi Sheba, Shakran Nuh Kabira. Thank you for the warm welcome. لوشاني إلى إنجليزايا بس لبي لكل عطرايا. Okay, that's about all the Assyrian for tonight. But I spoke to Robert not too long ago about tonight, and before we spoke about what's going to happen, I had the biggest honor just being thought of to be part of this group to welcome someone. We might be from different cities, right? But we all share one thing in common, that we love Robert. We love Robert for all the great work that he's done, and he's someone that we can all learn from. He's never compromised his integrity. He's never compromised his steadfast commitment to our community, and we should all learn from that, because look what he's created between our community, right? We might say Detroit, Chicago. I used to always be nervous coming here, but Robert used to always say, look, we might have differences in religion, but we're all one people. And he's always taught us that. So I had the pleasure of meeting Robert back in 2003. He and I got to know each other after Robert's visit to Iraq. And like many other people, I think we wanted to try to get an understanding of what he witnessed there and what hope our community had in Iraq. And from then, we became really good friends. We've worked on many issues together, whether it was the Chaldean Assyrian Syriac Council of America. Our chairman is here, Mr. Ismet Garmu. Ismet, great work that you've done. And I've also had the pleasure of working with Rabbi Giuliana Yonan, so we've always had a great partnership. We never really had elections, so I've only really worked with them, but otherwise, great group of guys. But we certainly became great friends. But let me tell you a little bit about Robert and the work that he's done. So we in Detroit run a social service agency that serves about more than 30,000 people each year. We see people and we help them with English, we help them find jobs, we put them on a path to citizenship. We have quite a large community. But Robert, from the beginning, was a dedicated partner to our organization, always providing counsel for our staff, giving us guidance on immigration matters, and frankly, even in Detroit, he became the go-to guy when it mattered for immigration issues and all things relating to law. He would numerous times helped people without question. If you didn't have money, Robert was happy to help you. The elderly in our community always went to Robert. Without hesitation, he provided services to them. Our religious leaders went to Robert, some of which are bishops now, and he was always extremely happy to help them. Never looking for any credit, doing it humble, with his humble attitude, without recognition. And he's someone, again, that I would always ask, are you in business to make money, or are you in business to help people? But he taught us the true the meaning of community. And frankly, there's not many people that share his intellect. I used to remember that we used to always argue about Assyrian and Chaldean while we all agreed it was the same name. I knew how smart Robert was, so I'd always surrender because I said, I'm not going to put up with it. Robert also was engaged in some activities in the Detroit area. He pointed out injustices as it pertained to the immigration attorneys in the city of Detroit, and how the judges in Michigan really did not represent our community well. There was a bias in place, and together we took action. The case against Robert clearly was politically motivated. I think we know that. And frankly, with what's going on today, I think a lot of what happens in the United States, unfortunately, is politically motivated. As a community, because of what's happened to our community in Iraq, we always feared government. We assumed that if the governments want something, or if the government's requesting something, we never questioned their motives nor their intent. We are always taught to just obey, and oftentimes we aided the government with the persecution of our own people. Many times our own people would collaborate and help the government take down our own. It's one of the biggest challenges in our community. We always, rather than lifting each other up, have a tendency to try to drag others down if they're successful. So let me just tell you this. Robert's not in this alone. If it happened to Robert, it can happen to each and every one of you. Don't forget that. So we must stand together, or otherwise it'll continue to happen in our community, and we must do something about it. So, Robert, I want to tell you, when you were gone for a few months, it was really a trying time for many people, but I also want to tell you that I gained another mother. You have such a wonderful family, and God bless them for how much they cared about you and how much this community cared about you. But I knew that that was the case because of how much you've always cared for our community. So God bless you for that. We really appreciate it. Let me just tell you quickly, in Detroit, there was a member of our community that the local bus system, co-workers there were discriminating against him. They were calling him a camel jockey, go back to your country, and the organization, a public company, did nothing to support him. He then went to the Arab American Anti-Discrimination Committee, other groups, because we had nothing in our community. A few weeks ago, or a few months ago, this gentleman finally, after 12 years, won a $3.5 million settlement in Detroit. There was another young man who was involved in a fight. He was going to become an attorney. A couple African-American youth approached him. They got into an altercation. He really did nothing wrong, but the prosecutor, an overzealous prosecutor, and the NAACP charged him with a hate crime. It wasn't until our relationships with the local chief of police and other judges that the case was eventually churned. But these type of actions continue all the time. Our community is at risk if we don't stick together and take action against people who want to either hurt us or are going to use political motives to gain for their own benefit. And so through that, we learned to create the Civil Liberties Advocates. It's an organization now focused on taking on issues in our community, dealing with workplace discrimination and other things. Robert, in so many ways, we always talk about sacrifice, and I could tell you that you've really bared the burden and you've carried the cross for our entire community. And I am personally thankful for your courage, your dedication, your leadership, your commitment to your community. I will always stand by you. I have before. I will today. I'll stand next to you, behind you, wherever you want me to be. We're all here for you. Thank God that we have you in our community, and I look forward to working with you in many years ahead. Thank you.
Very powerful. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is going to be speaking about the significance of the Assyrian struggle and the prosecution. Dr. John Michael, who is a talented surgeon for decades, an intellectual and advocate on behalf of his community, and is also a renowned philanthropist. Everyone, please help me welcome Dr. John Michael.
You could have said a few years instead of decades, but okay. Aynechon barane Robert Diral B. مناتي تمزمن سورة أدان سيتا طلبلا مني تمزمن بقري من روبرت مدلي شانه همزمن سورة in English مدلي سورة ديوغ يمي لاي برمالا إن بس مالوخ بتخطر يمي همزم English. And this is how we transition to English. Today we are here to welcome back a friend, brother, and advocate for the Assyrian, Chaldean, Syriac community. We are fortunate to have numerous attorneys here tonight who can dissect the various aspects and contradictions of the case against Robert. Did I say fortunate to have numerous attorneys? Okay, anyway. And the fact that 14 of the original counts were whittled down to just one, that even the presiding judge, in an extraordinarily rare move, called a close call. For me, though, the greater and more relevant narrative remains the overall context and the historical events during which these charges were first made. Presumably, the investigation into Robert's case began in 2008. Imagine that time and the subsequent years leading up to Robert's trial and all the murders, rapes, kidnappings, land grabs, and church bombings that occurred. Imagine the collective fear, real fear, and intimidation that these atrocities cost for our people in Syria and Iraq. Then imagine the last administration, at least partly cognizant of these conditions, and yet accusing Robert individually and all of us collectively of fabricating cases of persecution. We remember that time and the continued attacks till this day. We remember Bishop Braho, who was killed in northern Iraq for his faith in March of 2008, the year Robert's investigation began. We remember during the time of the investigation that over 120 churches were bombed, with hundreds killed in Iraq. We remember the bombing of Our Lady of Salvation Syriac Catholic Church in Baghdad, with 58 worshipers killed. Remember the Christmas Day bombing at St. John's Church in Dora in 2013, where 26 people were killed and 38 others injured. Yes, we remember the images of the masses of the bloodied and traumatized worshipers fleeing the destruction. You've all seen the pictures, and they are indelibly etched in our minds. Remember the letters delivered to all Assyrians in Dora by the Islamic State, threatening death if they did not convert, pay an exorbitant tax, and give up their daughters to jihadists. Remember that on June 10th, 2014, savages calling themselves the Islamic State captured Mosul and the Nineveh Plain, driving out hundreds of thousands of our people who have lived there as the descendants and as the originators of civilization for millennia. We remember that just months later, in February 2015, these same savages attacked and captured our villages in the Chabad region of Syria, killing many, and taking over 300 hostages, including women, children, and elderly. We remember these as just a handful of the more high-profile attacks against our people. But we also remember isolated incidents, like the teenage boy who was crucified simply because he was a Christian and in order to intimidate the wider community. We may continue with a litany of hundreds and even thousands of attacks. The point is that the persecution and attacks were universal, and no Assyrian was exempt from the intimidation. Remember that these collective, deliberate, and continuous attacks led to a mass exodus of Assyrians, leading to a possible 70, 80, 90% reduction in the native population. Remember that many of these hundreds of thousands made it to the U.S., and many sought out Robert as their advocate. Ironically, on March 15, 2016, months after his indictment and just weeks before the trial, then Secretary of State John Kerry finally and grudgingly acknowledged what we already knew, that Assyrian Christians in Iraq and Syria had indeed suffered genocide. The last administration had to be shamed and painfully dragged into this recognition because it legally, but ultimately not in real practice, obligated the U.S. to assist our long-suffering community. To add injustice to irony, in the month of May 2016, at the beginning of Robert's prosecution, the U.S. admitted over 1,000 Syrian refugees, among them only 2 Christians. For the entire year of 2016, over 12,000 Syrian refugees were admitted, with only 68, less than 0.5%, being Christian. As if to rub salt in the wound, when the persecuted Assyrian community most needed an advocate, Robert was enduring his trial. On the very day that Robert's trial began, on April 18th, 2016, the same administration that was prosecuting Robert appeared before the Supreme Court, defending their executive action that sought to shield 4.3 million illegal Central American refugees from deportation. 4.3 million. In Robert's case, out of over 4,000 cases for which he has advocated, in the final judgment, a close call by the judge, only one was left in doubt as to its refugee status authenticity, and even that through no fault of Robert's. I'm not here to debate the merits or contradictions of the Supreme Court case or the difficult situation of Central American migrants, but no one with any sense of fairness could reasonably conclude that the country conditions in Central America compare to the devastation and genocide faced by Assyrians. Not then and not now. On January 2nd, 2018, just 3 weeks before Robert began serving his sentence, Judge Goldsmith from the federal court in Michigan ordered the release of Assyrian Christian refugees who had been held for deportation because he cited the country conditions in Iraq would preclude their safety if sent back. Country conditions. Legalese for saying that if they returned, they may face harm or even death. Despite these late realizations, the legal machinery in Robert's case ground on. We remember finally that while consensus finally emerged on the genocide, at the same time, our community's greatest and most outspoken advocate in court was himself prosecuted in court here, and of all places, the U.S. I promise Athir I'll be finishing up soon. Where is he? Keeping the timer. On a personal note, I've witnessed Robert endure this ordeal over the past 3 years. I know he's been on a personal journey of reflection and introspection. I know he spent much time reading during his time away, and I know the book he perhaps read the most was the Bible. Robert being Robert, he also read new books on our modern history. He also asked for a book on how to establish charter schools for our community. That last one to me is the most telling. For many in Robert's position could have easily become disillusioned, resentful, and bitter for suffering this injustice. Instead, Robert has become more energized and committed. From my perspective, I know of no other Assyrian who has more dedicated his entire life, including his education and his career to addressing the historical injustice against Assyrians. Despite being singled out and persecuted, he remains an inspiration to me. With our community's help, with all of your help, we pray Robert will be renewed and restored and be able to rebuild his life, home, and family. Welcome back.
And before we welcome Robert, there's a little special presentation by an artist, Mr. Odisho Kifarkis, and he would like to present this gift to Robert and also say a couple words. Please help me welcome him.
رمشاق طاوة 3-4 خبراني لا زودان ساب كلهم بسبارخ قد شمخ من ربي روبرت جباروتا شمت دو شكلا قريش لي مقام خطرة يوم 3 قودها نسبة أخادشنا بشتاقة ميقرأ أخونا روبرت ميقرأ برناش اللي ما سيماطي لدرجة جباروتا إلا قايم وبالخ ومقرو وداوخ دوخياتا جباري وتادخ بمارا قرابي روبرت خييتون أنا برسوبايت اتلي طنت من ترابا جورتا من كل داني تلا انتو خمني قد مريزي وبلخي لها عودوتا درابي روبرت خشيخة لإلا وهلا بالزودة بسيم الرابع
And now, the man of the hour. Please help me welcome Robert DiCaleta.
Basima Raba. I think after this I'm going to run for a seat somewhere. Thank you all for being here, and thank you all for being there, wherever you are, in the land of Facebook or at home and you're not able to be here. I am deeply honored and grateful. If I don't mention you all by name, I'm sorry, but I'm grateful for all the speakers, grateful to all of you, grateful to my family. Your good wishes, your prayers. I'm truly sorry to have burdened you with my troubles, and I say that sincerely, the last few years. I know that many of you, particularly members of my family and my friends and my relatives and my supporters, were pained by what happened. And for that, I'm deeply sorry. But rest assured, I don't want you to feel sorry for me. I don't want you to say, poor Robert. I want you to know one thing. As strong as I was in the past, I'm coming back 100% stronger in the future. Now, there's absolutely no doubt that when the government seeks to prosecute you, it is something of a big deal, particularly if it's the federal government in the United States. It takes your time, your money, your energy, and your best efforts to fight back. It also takes much for you to be able to stand, to walk, and to think. I was fortunate that I had strong and supportive family, a loyal group of friends whose faith was solid, throngs of grateful clients from the past, and a community that understood what had happened. And then there was that voice inside of me that kept saying that I had to fight, if not for myself, then for my community, for those I represented, for the poor and vulnerable and persecuted people who I could not let go of. So it was not only for myself that I fought, at great cost, and at great cost to many of my supporters, but it was also really for my community, as Dr. John pointed out, and as Martin pointed out, and as others pointed out. Really, this was in part about my community. I had to draw on my experience and knowledge of the law and the courage to be questioning and to be critically thinking about the case, and the fortitude to stand and fight, and I did. And I wanted you all to be there every single day of that trial, because I had nothing to be ashamed of. I wanted you to see what was going on. And many of you saw and heard, and I think you came away thinking what impression the prosecution gave and what finally came out were two different things. I want you to know also, the way I think about this is that defiance of the government and critical thinking and questioning does not equal lawlessness, and it does not equal unruliness in society. It is an important aspect of an intelligent and sophisticated society and an important component for individual minds to have in a democracy. Many of those who come from repressive societies, as Martin so eloquently stated, have a great fear of government, an unreasonable fear, as if of the supernatural. I've seen it time and time again in court, particularly in Detroit, this great fear of government officials. And I always thought to myself, and I always encouraged my clients, in fact, one of my clients testified, it was one of the few things that came out that was truthful. She said when she was asked by the prosecutor, what did he say when he came out? What did Mr. DeColeta say when he came out of the courtroom and you were waiting for him? He said, why are you afraid? That's what she said. Why are you afraid? Don't be afraid. I had to say that to my clients repeatedly. They were afraid of government officials, of the government process. And I irritated government officials in the government process because I often questioned. That doesn't mean I'm doing things unlawfully. That means I question certain things, and I continue to do so. As American citizens, as thinking and questioning persons in society, we cannot allow for people to simply listen to the government without asking questions. That's now, that's before, that's in every administration. I'm not going to tell you this administration's better than the one before. You have your political arguments. I don't want to get involved in that, but I'm going to tell you, you always should question government. Always. Close to 4,000 years ago, a distant voice of a great king from the past tells us that he sought, quote, listen to these words, quote, bring about the rule of righteousness in the land so that the strong should not harm the weak, to further the well-being of mankind. Do you know who that was? That was Hammurabi, the great king of Babylon. He said he took his laws from the god Shamash, Lord of Justice, whose symbol was the sun, or the sign of the sun, or what is today called the Assyrian star, and inscribed them in stone for all centuries to remember. When I practiced, I made sure that the symbol of Shamash was on the building where my office used to be. It's still there. It's a reflection of my pride in my heritage and my desire for justice, particularly for the weak. I sought justice for my clients because they deserved it, as many of you have recognized today. They were persecuted and defenseless. They were the weak that Hammurabi was worried about, and that they would be harmed by the strong. No doubt, I believed in them. I fought for them, and I did so because it was legal, it was moral, and it was right. And there were those who did not like it. One writer has quoted the prosecutor in my case as saying that I was a, quote, master manipulator of a process that relies on truthfulness, end of quote, and that I had learned the loopholes and gained them. And that matching those lies with media reports of real events in his client's home countries. End of quote. That was what a reporter said about the prosecution. Of course, I disputed this in court. I fought it vehemently. I did everything I could in the legal process, and I respect the legal process because I was part of the legal process. I'm an attorney. I was an attorney. I was also called the Robin Hood, I was quoted as labeling myself the Robin Hood of refugees by several newspapers. I don't know where the term came from originally, but they said I called myself that. Well, there's two problems with that. The first is that it's impossible for me to call myself the Robin Hood of refugees because I never did so. I never went around telling people I was a Robin Hood of refugees. Second, I never really represented refugees. I represented people seeking asylum. Refugees come from outside of the United States into the United States. They're not allowed to be represented by American attorneys. So I could not have been Robin Hood of refugees. So now you're seeing my image on this very beautifully done poster, banner, thank you. I'm very scripted, I guess. On this banner, who was done by Mr. Leonard in Detroit, thank you very much for that, for both banners, by the way. Why would I then title my book, The Robin Hood of Refugees? It's because when someone is being prosecuted, what happens is, particularly in federal prosecutions, the federal prosecution and the media work together almost hand in hand. There's an unfairness to this that everyone should know about. We don't argue much about it, we don't think much about it, but it's really part of the case that you're often labeled and humiliated and alienated from your friends and your family because the prosecution is coming for you. And what's supposed to happen to people like this is once they're labeled by the prosecution and the media, is that everyone has to kind of throw up their hands and say, listen, I'm sorry, I gotta go, I can't stick around with you. That's the hope of the prosecution, is to isolate and kill the defendant. And that should be a concern of every American. Never mind Assyrians, Chaldeans here. Every American ought to be concerned about that. And I think people have begun to question this. And when I was away, I had a chance to read a lot of books. One of them was called 3 Felonies a Day. It was written by a prominent attorney named Harvey Silvergate. And in it, he states, regarding this increasing power of government that we all are concerned about, and I'm actually glad that this administration seems to be concerned about it, quote, the increasing power that the federal government exerts over every element of the private sector, as demonstrated by the power to investigate, to prosecute, and even to convict defendants who have not committed a clearly defined crime, is a threat to the nation as a whole. It undermines a critical tension, an essential balance of power between the government and the governed. In the words of Hammurabi, between the strong and the weak. According to Sean Bauer, author of American Prison, quote, we are living through a time of mass incarceration with few parallels in world history. The United States imprisons a higher portion of its population than any other country in the world. In 2017, we had 2.2 million people in prisons and jails, a 500% increase over the last 40 years. We now have almost 5% of the world's population and nearly a quarter of its prisoners. When we look back in a century, I am convinced, says the author, that our prison system will be one of the main factors that define the current era. History will one day record the episode of prosecution I don't call myself persecuted, I call my clients persecuted. They were persecuted. As a sad and disappointing one. It is sad and disappointing. This prosecution was sad and disappointing. I oftentimes take myself out of it and I think about these people who were made to testify, and I thought it was a very sad episode in American history. Not only because the government's case was a weak one, but because it chose to come after the most persecuted and most vulnerable people in society, in American society. You will read much more about this in the book that is going to be prepared. And you will hear me talk about this more in coming forums. You stood by me through the years. It's been a few years already. It was 2014 when I remember in September that the government came for me after having investigated me for many years. And I hope that you will continue to do so, and I trust you will. Just as I stood for the rights of the weak in the past, who hopefully would not be harmed by the strong, and will always continue to do so. I forgive those who testified against me, and I mean that. My battle is not with them. It is not with them. It is not with those who testified against me. They were the weak. My battle was and is with the strong, with the manipulators behind those people. And it will always be so. No one will ever pit us against each other if we know what is good for us. And Martin, I applaud you. You've done your utmost in Detroit and other people who support you to keep that notion alive in our community in Detroit. For that, I applaud you, and many other things, of course, but someday when I'm speaking about you, I've got a lot to say. As I see the destruction of the villages and churches of my people in the Nineveh Plain and in the Habur region, as I hear of them being pursued and hunted for abduction and for killing, as I come to learn of their collective displacement from their homeland, as I read and view the destruction of their ancient shrines and cities and cemeteries, so that no trace of them would ever be left, as if no one knew they ever existed, I am deeply saddened that I'm not in the battle. But I also grow stronger and more courageous and more determined and more defiant to stand and fight for their rights in other ways. I want them to live in safety, and I want them to be at peace. I want that for my people and for all vulnerable people, both in the East and in the West. It is not only just a struggle for those who are persecuted, but a moral duty and an act that goes to the core of one's conscience. Gandhi said it best when he said, "There is a higher court than the courts of justice, and that is the court of conscience. It supersedes all other courts." I respect the courts and I respect the law in the United States. But my conscience is clear about what happened in my case. And my conscience is clear about supporting those who are persecuted. I thank you, and I ask God to bless you. Thank you for this honor.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. And just if you want, like we said before, if you want more information on the book, if you want to sign up, I think there's an email list going on. But other than that, we thank you for your time. God bless you, Robert. God bless everyone. Have a good night, everyone.
رب أغزوني قمايه يا قطط شرايه رب يا إيقار خرامة ممنون قابل شلامة غطينا وعدا بنونخ انسهتنا بلي خدستونخ من ايدك سبيلك خير وتبط ممطيلة غطينا وعدا بنونخ انسهتنا بلي خدستونخ من ايدك سبيلك خير وتبط ممطيلة Dottoraim gül pergüşmeyi